Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting episode in the Let's Build That App channel. Really hope you're having a fantastic day. Now, in today's video, what exactly are we going to learn about here? Well, we're actually going to continue on from the last lesson where we're trying to work towards a pretty fancy animation inside of our application, right? So the first thing I want to show you is what that animation looks like right over here inside of our iPhone 8 Plus simulator. And so notice that every time I press into the screen, we get a very nice animation of these 6 emoji icons inside of this horizontal container view. So that's the animation we're trying to build out. And in the very last episode, we kind of left off here inside of this sample application. So this is the iPhone 10 simulator. And basically, every time I press into the screen, we get this ugly red box to animate inside of our application, right? And basically the way that we got this to work is to configure a UI long press gesture recognizer. And every time we press into the screen with that gesture, we animate this red box into view. Now, the way we are doing this animation over here is to use a couple of calls to UIView animate, as well as some tricks using the transformation property on this red container view. All right, so that's kind of where we left off in the very last episode. Make sure to catch up by watching it using the link in the description below. All right, guys, so having said all of that, in today's video, we are going to transform this red box into the nice icons that we have inside of the finished version of our application over here. And so basically, I'm going to teach you how to use a UIStackView and a little bit of math to actually place these emoji icons inside of that stack view. And then finally, at the very end of today's lesson, I'm going to talk a little bit about hit testing to figure out how to animate these emojis every time I mouse over them. All right, so if you've heard of hit testing before, it might sound a little bit complicated, but let me show you how easy it is in today's lesson. Okay, so now that you know exactly what we're trying to build out here, let's go ahead and jump back into Xcode right now. Alrighty, everyone, welcome to the coding session for today's video. The way I'm going to start off today's lesson is to go inside of the view controller file that we were working on in the previous episode, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to this method over here called handle gesture begin. And the first line of code inside of this method is called view add subview icons container view. And the icons container view is actually this red view that we're seeing animated inside of our application. All right, so that's kind of where we left off. And the way I'm going to actually modify my code right now is to turn this red box into the white background color that we need. So icons container view is defined all the way on line 18. Background color is red. Let me just change that to white. And the reason why I'm doing that is because the final feature actually has a white background instead of the red. So clicking onto that, we now have a white box animating inside of our app. So pretty good stuff there, and hopefully an easy start for today's video. Now, the white box over here, I actually want to start adding some subviews inside of it. And let's just start off with a red view on the left side and a blue view on the right side. And so once you see the 2 subviews, we are going to slowly expand that to more views inside of this white box. All right, so that's how we are going to start. And I'm going to introduce these 2 subviews inside of this closure code of icons container view. And let's just make 2 more lines here. And I'm going to define a red view equals UI view, like so. Let's see, red view dot background color equals dot red, like so. Let's introduce a blue view as well, so UI view. And blue view dot background color equals dot blue. Okay, so now that I have my 2 views declared right here, I want to add them inside of this white box somehow. And the way I'm going to do that is to use a stack view, because that component allows me to equally space them out and make them equal width as well really easily. So let's see how that works by declaring a stack view over here. Use a UIStackView component with the constructor of arrange subviews. And let me declare the arrange subviews 1 line above, just to make this easier to read. Let's just make an array, use the red view, and then use the blue view like so. All right, so arrange subviews just goes in there. And the next thing you really have to do is to specify the distribution property to be filled equally. That way the 2 subviews will be filled equally. And now we have our stack view that we can add inside of this white box over there. And so you might have already forgotten, but this container view is actually our white box. So I'm just going to say container view.add subview of the stack view like so. And one more thing we have to do is to actually set a frame on this stack view. So I'm going to set it right here because I'm going to use this container frame right here. So let's say stack view.frame equals the container view frame above, which is just this guy right there. All right, so a little bit of code that we just typed out, but once you kind of see it in action, you'll see what it's doing. So click into that, you see we have the red view and also the blue view on the right side. All right, so not too difficult, I hope. And let's see, what do I want to do now? Well, you'll notice that inside of the finished version of our application, these icons all have some spacing in between them. And there's also some padding on the left and the right and the top and the bottom edges, right? So I'm going to now try to include the spacing and padding for you by using some additional properties inside of our stack view. So let's start off with the padding or the spacing in between over here. And let's see, the stack view is right over there. Let's use the spacing of something like 8. And I'll try to run this just to show you what that does. And let's see, we are up and running. And you see that white space over here? That is just 8 pixels wide. Okay, so now the next question is, how do we get the left, right, and top, bottom padding inside of our stack view? Well, that's pretty easy if you specify this property called layout margins. And this guy is a UI edge insets type. And we'll use the top, left, bottom, right. And because I actually want to use this 8 value there, I would like to declare this as a constant somewhere. So let's just use it up here as, let's see, padding of a, let's see, CG float type equals 8. And let's see, padding goes over here. And this is the padding left, let's see, bottom, right, and top. So once you have that, you also have to specify a third property. And I believe it's called layout relative arrangement, something like that, and just set that property equals to true. And you can finally run your application and you'll see that you'll have some padding on the left over there. So the left, the right, the middle, the top, and the bottom. So click it over here, you can see that a lot more obviously. Okay, so that's kind of how you include some padding and some spacing for your container view. And the next thing you probably want to do is to maybe include a third subview inside of this guy somehow. And the way that you would probably do that is to use let yellow view equals UI view. And let's see, yellow view dot background color and specify dot yellow. And let's just pump in the yellow view inside of our arrange subviews array and try to run that one more time. So let's see what we get. Click into that and you get really, really skinny views inside of your stack view, right? So the next question is, what exactly do we need to do in order to get these subviews to be perfectly square or perfectly circular is what we want. So let me show you what that looks like over here. These subviews are perfectly circular and I want to show you how to do that right now. And this is actually going to involve a little bit of math, but it's not too hard, so don't be scared off. And the first thing I'm going to do is to actually define a height for the subviews inside of my stack view. So let's just go over here and inside of this section of the code, I'm going to specify some configuration options. And let's say the icon height. So I'm going to use a CG float as well. And let's just use a value of 50, okay? So that's kind of how tall my icons need to be. So this is taller than 50. It's roughly 100 minus, I think, the top and bottom padding. So this guy over here is going to be icons, the icon height, let's see, plus 2 times padding over there. So I'm just going to type that out and run the code to show you what that'll do for us. And basically the stack view will now be of, let's see, height of 50 plus 2 times padding, which is 16, and this is roughly 66 in terms of the height over there. All right, so the next thing I actually need to do is to now somehow make these boxes over here perfectly square so that I can round them off a little bit easier later on. And so the way I'm going to do that is actually calculate the width of this entire box, the white box over here. I need to make sure that the width will include the padding over here, the 2 spaces in between over here, and the padding on the right side. And so I'm going to type out the width calculation right now, and hopefully you'll see what it's doing. So let the width equals, let's see, what do we want? We want 3 of the icon heights, so 3 times icon height is going to equal this, so 3 times the icon height over here. And that's because we have 3 subviews in there. And instead of using 3, we actually want to use arrange_subviews.count. So this is arrange_subviews.count, and that is what it is. But because this guy is an integer and this guy is a CG float, it's actually better if you just take this guy out and just say let icon or num icons equals arrange_subviews.count and just use this instead, and then turn this guy into a CG float so that all your types actually match correctly. So this is a float and this is also a float, so the actual multiplication works out. All right, so that's the amount of spacing for 3 of these icons, and we need to include, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 padding for this entire box to work out correctly. So the way I'm going to do that is to use plus num icons and plus 1 over here. So that's going to give us 4 for this example, and times padding like that. All right, so the width is just a basic calculation. I'm going to put that inside of the container frame now for the CG Rect, and you'll see what that does if I just click into the app right now. And then now you get perfectly square subviews inside of your entire stack view. So hopefully you were able to follow with the calculation over here. It's not too complicated, and the reason why I'm making this calculation like that is because if I wanted to add a 4th view inside of this guy, you can actually do it very easily. Let's say let gray view equals UI view, and we can say gray view dot background color equals dot gray, and just use this guy inside of here. So hopefully I can paste that in, and let's try to run this right now and see exactly what that'll give us inside of our application right over there. All right, so that stack view now has enough width to make all of these subviews perfectly square. All right, so that's pretty good. And the next thing I would like to show you is how we can actually reduce some of this code over here. So what I mean is, let's say I want to add 2 more subviews inside of this container view so that I can have 6 emoji icons. Well, I don't really want to type out this code 2 more times. There's actually an easier way of doing that. So I'm going to somehow modify all of this code over here. So let me comment that out. And let me show you an easier way of generating this array of subviews. And let me just say UI color.red, and let's just use .blue over here. So that's how you get 2 colors inside of an array. And the reason why you have to include this in the beginning is to just declare what the types are, and it'll automatically be able to infer this blue is a UI color. Now this array, you can call this map function over here, hit enter, and this is one of the colors inside of your array. You want to modify the T generic over here to be a specific type of UI view. And let's see, inside of here, let me just say let v equals UI view, v.background color equals this color over here, which is just one of those guys. And now I can just return this v. And so basically, this is going to give us our arranged subviews. So let me just hit that and set that equals to that, and we should be good to go. I can now run my application, and we'll have something very similar to what we had before. So clicking into that, we have our 2 views just like so. Now, another explanation for this is that whenever you are using this map function on an array, the elements that you are returning inside of your closure, it's all going to be grouped together in another array. So basically we are just generating these views based on this array, and that's kind of how we have the different colors inside of our container view over there. So hopefully you guys are aware of what map does. It's actually a very useful higher order function that you should be really used to. Okay, so the next thing we probably want to do is to maybe include a 3rd color in here. So you can see that it's really easy to just put in values in here. You don't have to add all of this code. And yeah, it just works out perfectly for us using map. And click into that. We have 4 subviews in there now. And the next thing we can do is actually say v dot, let's say layer over here, corner radius. I'm going to try to make these subviews in here circular. And because I actually need it to be based on this icon height, I'm going to move this code up to the top over here. And I would like to say, let's see, icon height divided by 2. And that'll make these views perfectly circular for us. So one more run, click into that. We now have these circular subviews inside of our stacked view. And the last thing we need to do is to also round off the entire container view. And that's pretty easy if we go down to the, let's see, container view over here. So let me just modify the container view dot layer dot corner radius, and I'll set it equal to the container view dot frame dot height divided by 2. And basically we're just going to take the entire height, make it round by using half of that value for the corner radius, and that'll give us this effect over there. Okay, so that's a lot of math. And it's actually very advantageous for us to develop this code without the storyboard, because you won't be able to generate dynamic views such as this using the interface builder tool. Okay, and so if you wanted to include a different view in here, perhaps like dark gray, you can just modify your code very, very quickly, and you'll just generate views on the fly, on demand, like that over there. All right, so that's getting a lot closer to what we need inside of our final feature. The next thing we would probably want to do is to generate some kind of shadow for this container view. So if I go over here, you see that it has a dark shadow to it right underneath the container. So if I click into that, there really isn't any shadow that separates this from the view behind it. And the way that you would probably want to do this is to modify the container view. So let's just use shadow. So container view, and let's see, layer and shadow color is going to be UI color. I like to use this white constructor with 0.4 and 0.4 for the alpha. Make sure to use the CG color, and container view also has the layer shadow. I believe radius, I'll use a value of 8. Doesn't matter so much, just use whatever you feel like works for you. Shadow opacity, I think I'm going to use 0.5. And you can try to run this, and this will generate that shadow behind your container view. So clicking onto here, you can see that there's a separation between this view and the view behind it. And that looks pretty good. You can actually modify the shadow another way. And let's say that we want the shadow to be actually facing down in the 90-degree direction. Instead of the shadow being up there, I actually want it to be down here. So you can modify that by saying layer.shadow offset, and this is a CG size property, and you want to use the width of 0 and the height, let's say 4. And so that's going to bring the shadow down 4 pixels, and it's going to make sure that it's centered in the middle in terms of the x-axis, and that'll give you the shadow down underneath right over there. Okay, so that's just a very, very easy trick to modify the shadow to, you know, make it behave the way you want it to. And so that looks pretty good, right? So the final part of this application is to actually make these subviews over here to actually be these image views with these icons or these emojis, right? So how exactly do we want to do that? Well, now that we have this bit of code here being kind of generated, or these arranged subviews are generated from this array of colors, I can actually apply a very similar trick, but let's first generate this images array. So let's just put an array right here, and this images will actually come from the assets. So these are the image icons over there, so that icon, and these other icons over there. So going back to the view controller, I already know what those icons are named. So I believe it is the blue like over there. So that's blue, red heart is that. And let's just use the cry laugh. And I believe we have the cry, or the cry, just the cry over there. And let's see, maybe we want the surprised as well. So surprised. And the last icon is the angry icon. All right, so these are just UI images inside of this array. So you see it's a UI image type. And now we can use this to kind of do the same trick over here with the map. So let's just paste that in there instead. So the images, and this guy, instead of being a color, it is now an image. So let me just use image like so. And what I would like to do is, instead of using just a plain old UI view, I can actually change this to be something else. So let me modify this by commenting that out. And let's say image view equals UI image view. And this guy has an image constructor like so. Pop in the image from your array, which is over here. And you can say image view dot, layer corner radius, whatever this code is here. So let me just copy that. Paste that over here, and you can just return this image view like so. And running your code now, your subviews inside of your container view or your stack view will now be perfectly round and also include your images like so. All right, so that's a really cool trick, right? And if you wanted to shrink this to be a little bit smaller, you can now modify the icon height to be something smaller as well. So let's say you want to use 38, and perhaps the padding is going to be shrunken down as well to 6. You can now run your code. Your application will now render out this guy over here. So that's a little bit smaller than I probably want, but it looks really good to me. Ooh, oh boy. So I think that was quite a bit of code. Hopefully you guys are still able to follow along. The math that I'm using here actually took me quite a while to come up with, and this is the cleanest way that I can actually perform the calculation to get these perfectly round circles inside of the container view. Okay, so with that being said, the next thing we would like to move on to is to actually animate these views inside of our container so that we can actually make it animate upwards like that. So this right here is actually going to require something called hit testing, which is pretty simple, and I'm going to show you exactly how it works right now. And let's kind of move this out of the way. And over here, I actually want to detect whenever I am kind of mousing over these icons inside of my container view, right? And let's see, the first thing I would like to do is to actually set a property on the image view. So image view is user interaction enabled. I want to set this guy equal to true. And the reason why you have to do that is because hit testing will not work if you don't do that. So required for hit testing, and just make sure you include this in your code, otherwise it's not going to work. So with that being said, I'm going to now show you how to track wherever you are moving whenever you use this UI long gesture recognizer. So going down to the method of, let's see, set up long press gesture, and inside of here is where we are handling the actual selector. And let's see, down here we have state began, state ended, and I'm going to introduce a third state. So if the gesture is actually equal the changing state, which is .change, we are going to do something else. And I'm going to declare a function over here to actually handle the changing of the gesture inside of our application. So this guy will be called handle gesture changed. That sounds like a pretty good name. It's going to take in the actual long press gesture recognizer. And there we go. We can actually print out something inside of here. And why don't I actually call handle gesture change like so, with the actual gesture coming from our selector function. So popping that in there, we can try to print something as the gesture is changing, and I'm going to say let pressed location equals, what is this guy, gesture.location, and I'm just going to use self.view right now, and I'll change that a little bit later on. But I want to run my app now just to show you what it's going to do every time I move the gesture as I use the long press. Okay, so long press here, we get that. If I move left, we get the X value shrinking all the way to the 0 value once I'm on the left edge of the simulator. So that's close to 0. If I scroll to the right, so scroll to the right, the X value increases all the way to about 368. Okay, so that's kind of how this gesture works. And if I go up and down, the Y value changes all the way to 0 up here. So somewhere close to 0. And all the way down to 760 or 802 somewhere down here. Okay, so now that you understand what this press location thing is, let's actually move on to figuring out which one of these emoji icons we are mousing over every time we move our finger across the screen, right? So the way to do that is to use something called hit testing. And let me show you how that works by calling it on the icons container view. And basically any UI view component of UIKit has this method called hit test. And it takes in a CG point and also an event. This is going to be nil because we don't really care about it. And the important thing is this CG point parameter. Now this hit test, if you read the documentation, it says that it returns the farthest descendant of the receiver in the view hierarchy. And that's probably a little bit confusing, but essentially what it means is as you are trying to hit test, it's going to return you the deepest descendant subview inside of this entire container. So basically if I'm over here, I'll get the blue, I'll get the red, and I'll get this surprised icon over there. And the last thing we need to figure out is what exactly is this point parameter. And the first thing that I tried was to actually use the press location over there, but that's actually not correct. And the reason is because we actually want a point that is relative to the actual container view so that it can perform the correct hit testing. So what I mean is whenever I am in this corner over here, it should be about 0, 0. But if you look at the console, it's about 58, 278. So the press location is actually relative to the entire view. And that's because we have that view over there. Let me just swipe that away. And so let me show you what the solution is, and you'll probably get a better understanding. And let's see, the view, I actually want to use the icons container view instead. So let me try to run this right now and show you what the press location is going to print out in the console. And let's see, hold on to the app and I'll go to this corner over here, and you see how it's very close to 0, 0. So 0, 0 is about right there. And if I scroll all the way to the right, the X value will increase and it'll be about 265 and 40 on the bottom right corner. So now this press location is relative to the icons container view, which is our white view over there. And if I use that for my CG point parameter, I'll get the correct view. Okay, so now I actually want to set this to be hit test view equals that. And let's see, what exactly is this guy? Well, it is an optional UI view. And what I need to do is this over here. I'm just going to say if hit test view, if it is of type UI image view, I am going to say hit test view dot alpha equals to 0. So let's see what that does, and hopefully you'll understand once I start playing around with the application. So clicking onto that, I will mouse over that, and then these two last icons on the right. All right, so basically the hit test view is checking if it's an image view, and then we're just setting the alpha, making the icons actually disappear inside of the container view. All right, so we don't really want to make the icon disappear, and instead we want to do something else, such as UIView.animate. So animates, and we'll use the one with the spring, so I'll just type that out. And let's see. The reason why I'm testing for UI image view is because sometimes the hit test will actually return the entire container's view, or it might actually return the stack view inside of it. So that's kind of reason why I'm checking for the image view type. Okay, so moving on here, I want to actually animate the view every time I mouse over it. And so let's see, the interval for the duration is 0.5 seconds, 0, 1, 1. Curve is out over here, animations, hit enter, and this guy I will change it to something else for the completion block. I don't think I'm really interested in the completion of the animation, so I'll just apply some animation over here, and I'll say hit test view dot transform equals to something, and let me just type it out and you'll see exactly what it does. CG affine transform. I'll use the translation constructor. The X value will be 0. The Y value will be something like -50. So let me just run this and you'll see what it does. It's very obvious once you kind of see the animation. And I'll click on this guy and it comes up. I'll mouse over, mouse over, mouse over. And that is the transformation of each of these emojis as I mouse over them. All right, so if I let go, the view disappears, and you'll see that there's a slight bug where these icons or these emojis aren't animated back inside of the container. So we'll fix that in just a little bit. But what I want to do now is to actually bring back our finished application and take a look at the behavior inside of this guy. And basically, whenever I mouse over a particular emoji, it'll animate up, and the previous animated emoji will kind of animate down. So it kind of goes and works in tandem like that. And so let me show you how to do that by modifying our code here. So let's go back into the animation over here and see what we can do. And so basically our icons container view, this guy, so I'll say self.icons container view, it has a property on it called SubViews. Now, because I already know how this works, we basically have a stack view inside of the container view, and that stack view contains all of our emoji icons. So what you can actually do, because you know the structure and the hierarchy of your subviews, you can get the first view out like so. So this is let stack view equals to that. And the stack view also has subviews like so. And you can say for each. And these are all the images. So image view, you can call this whatever you want. And what I'm going to do is to just say image view.transform equals to the identity transform. So let me try to run this, and then I'll perhaps explain what this code does. And let's see, I'll click into that and mouse over that, and that's kind of what you get. And so essentially what's happening is I'm looping through all of the views as I mouse over, and I'm setting it all to the identity transformation on line 112, and the actual image view that I'm mousing over is actually being transformed on line 115. So basically we're transforming this, and then we are transforming that, and all the other emoji icons are being brought back to the center of our container view over there. Okay, so that's how we get this behavior. And let me show you how to fix the problem in which that icon right there in the middle is animated upwards every time we bring the view back in. And so we have that bug as well. So what I need to do is to handle the behavior of the gesture being let go. In other words, we want to modify this code over here when the gesture state is ended. And so we want to, let's see, I want to put a comment here, clean up the animation. So let's see, how do we want to do that? Well, I'm going to animate all of these emojis back down to identity when I let go. So that's what happens over here. And let's see, what do I want to do? I guess I'll just copy all of this code here, and I'll just paste it over there. And let's see, that looks pretty good. I don't think I want this code because I don't have the hit test view. And let's see, that's all being animated down. And I want to comment this out for now. So I'll show you what this does. And let's just run our code and run the application to see the animation. So click on that. And so I'll do that, that, and that. And then now I'll let go, and you'll see that it animates back, but this guy is not being removed anymore. So the way that you actually do that is you probably want to do it during the completion of your animation. So let's see the code that actually does that. So animate spring. I think I just want to see the completion code over here. So that's kind of what I need. And it's really hard to type this out if you don't have the autocomplete. So I'll just use 0.5011 curve ease out. So what is this? Curve out and animation, and that looks good. So I'll just cut this and paste that in there. This guy, I'll just use underscore because I don't care about that parameter. And this guy, I will copy this, or just cut rather, paste that in there, and remove this top portion of the code there. And I'll just animate this one more time. I think I need to say self in front of that. And hopefully that'll clean up most of the animation that I need. I don't think I'm done just yet, so let go. And so let go. Okay, so that looks almost complete. However, I do want to animate this view back down when I let go. So what I mean is I want to animate it back down like that. It should animate up and animate down. So the way I'm going to do that is to actually modify the transform of our icons container view. So you notice this is a common theme with animations. A transform is actually really useful. So transform, and I'm going to say self.icons container view transform, and I'll translate this guy to 0, and I think I will use either 50, I guess that works, or Maybe you can use self.icons container view, frame.height, whatever you want, whatever works for you. Let's use value of 50 just to be safe here. And we will try to see what this does. And so basically during the animation of during the gesture state ended, we'll animate it back down like that. So back down and back down. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The final thing is to change the alpha as well. So self.icons container view, alpha equals 0. And that'll fade it out during the transformation end. So let's see, we'll look at it one last time. Click on that and click on that. And that's what we get, so click on that. Okay, and if you mouse over these icons, you'll get that behavior of this animation of all of these guys working one by one. Okay, so that's pretty good. And let's see that one more time. So it looks pretty damn awesome. All right, so now what we actually want to do is one last thing with the animation here, which is kind of tricky. And you see that when I'm even down here, I can actually animate the icons upwards. I don't exactly have to be directly over the emojis inside of my container. So if I click on that, you'll see that if I'm down here, the animation doesn't exactly work 100%. You have to mouse over the items correctly. And so I am going to try to show you how that works. And let's go to the handle gesture changed method. And maybe I'll just show you the answer and you'll take a guess as to what it's doing. But press location over here is how we are using the hit test. So press location. And this guy, I'll say let's fixed y location equals CG points. And I'll just type out the code and perhaps you'll leave a comment down below if you don't understand exactly what it's doing. So I'll just pump in 25 or maybe self.icons container view .frame.height divided by 2. And we'll use this instead of press location. And let's see, I'll run this one more time and we should be good to go here. So let's see if this is the magic that we need. Click into that. I'll go down here and just scroll over to the right. And that's the animation that we have inside of our application. Alrighty guys, that's gonna wrap it up for today's super long video. Now, one last thing I do want to say about animations is that I feel like animations take quite a while to implement correctly inside of your application, but once you have it working, it feels pretty darn incredible, right? So if you're interested in more Swift development, make sure to check out the couple of courses on the website. I hope you found today's video helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye bye guys.